The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, quiet ranch land. The air smelled of dust, grass, and freedom. But by the riverbank, a woman sat alone, shivering. Her name was Clara James, and her eyes were filled with tears. Her husband, Tom, had driven her there before sunrise. He told her to get out of the truck. She thought he was joking at first, but his voice was cold. "You're nothing but trouble," he said, before turning the truck around and leaving her there, with no bag, no phone, nothing. Clara watched the dust rise behind his truck as it disappeared. The world fell silent except for the sound of running water and the wind brushing through dry grass. She hugged herself tightly. Her heart felt heavy. For years, she had tried to be the wife he wanted, quiet, patient, obedient. But no matter how much she tried, it was never enough. Today, he finally proved it. He didn't love her. He didn't even care if she was safe. Her shoes were wet from the riverbank, and her dress was torn a little at the bottom. She took off her shoes and sat on a smooth rock. The water touched her feet, cool and calm, as if trying to comfort her. She began to cry softly, not loudly, the kind of tears that came from being hurt too many times. She whispered, "Why me?" As the hours passed, Clara sat still, her mind empty. She watched small ripples on the water and the reflection of the blue sky. She had nowhere to go. The road was far, and she didn't even know which direction led to town. The silence made her feel invisible, like the world had forgotten her too. Then she heard something, a sound of hooves. She looked up quickly. A brown horse was approaching from the other side of the river. The rider sat tall, a man in a clean white shirt, a brown hat, and leather boots. He moved with quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the land as if he belonged to it. The man slowed down when he saw her. He frowned, surprised to see a woman sitting alone by the river. He guided his horse closer. "Ma'am." His voice was deep but kind. "Are you all right?" Clara blinked, unsure whether to speak. She wiped her tears quickly. I don't know," she said softly. "My husband left me here." The man climbed down from his horse. His boots touched the ground gently. He took off his hat, revealing warm brown hair and kind eyes. "Name's Colt Walker," he said, offering his hand slowly, not wanting to scare her. "You're safe now, ma'am. Let's get you out of here." Clara stared at his hand, strong, rough, but steady. No one had offered her kindness in a long time. After a long pause, she reached out and placed her trembling hand in his. It felt like the first piece of safety she'd touched in years. And that was how everything began, by the quiet riverbank, where one life ended and another quietly began. Clara sat behind Colt on his horse, holding onto the side of his jacket nervously. The ride was quiet except for the sound of hooves and the soft breeze brushing her face. She didn't know where they were going, but the warmth of the sun and the steady rhythm of the horse made her feel calmer than she had in a long time. For the first time that day, she wasn't crying. She was breathing. Colt glanced back every now and then to check on her. He didn't ask too many questions, just rode steadily, as if giving her time to feel safe. After about 20 minutes, they reached a wide open space with wooden fences, a red barn, and several horses grazing nearby. It was peaceful and alive, like a world far from pain. "Welcome to my ranch," he said gently. "You're safe here." Clara looked around, speechless. The land stretched out far, golden under the morning sun. There were trees, hay bales, and a small house with a porch swing that creaked softly in the wind. It looked like the kind of place where people smiled and healed. She blinked back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Colt helped her off the horse carefully, his hand steady and patient. "You look tired," he said softly. "Come inside. My housekeeper, Martha, will get you something warm to eat." Clara followed him quietly. The smell of baked bread and coffee filled the air. Inside, the house was simple but full of warmth, wooden floors, clean curtains, and soft light coming through the windows. Martha, a kind older woman with silver hair, gasped when she saw Clara. "Oh dear," she said, rushing over. "You're freezing. Sit down, sweetheart." She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and gave her a cup of tea. The first sip made Clara close her eyes. It tasted like peace. "Thank you," she said softly, grateful. Colt stood nearby, arms folded, watching quietly. There was concern in his eyes, but not pity. He didn't look at her like she was broken, just like someone who needed rest. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said gently. "No one's gonna hurt you here." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. She didn't have the words to thank him, but her heart felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. As the day ended, Martha gave Clara clean clothes and a small room near the porch. She looked out the window that night, watching the stars over the open land. Somewhere out there, her cruel husband was probably laughing or sleeping, not caring where she was. But here, under this roof, she felt warmth, and when she closed her eyes, she saw Colt's face, calm, kind, and strong, and for the first time in years, she whispered a small prayer of gratitude. The next morning, the soft sound of birds woke Clara up. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting golden lines on the wooden floor. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the folded shawl on the chair, the cup of tea beside her bed, and it came back. The river, the horse, the man who helped her. Her heart tightened with a mix of sadness and relief. She got up slowly and walked to the porch. The air was cool and fresh. From there, she could see Colt out in the field, working with the horses. He moved with calm strength, his sleeves rolled up, guiding the animals with quiet commands. Clara watched for a while, her arms wrapped around herself. He looked like someone who understood silence, not afraid of it, but comfortable in it. Martha came up behind her, carrying a tray of breakfast. "He's been out there since dawn," she said softly, smiling. "That man loves his land more than anything." Clara smiled a little, though it was shy. "He seems kind," she said quietly. Martha nodded. "He is. Lost his wife a few years ago. After that, he buried himself in work. Haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you yesterday." Clara's face turned red, and she quickly looked down at her tea. Later that day, Clara offered to help around the house. She washed dishes, folded laundry, and swept the porch. It felt good to do something again, to be useful. When Colt returned from the fields, he noticed the clean porch and smiled. "You didn't have to do all that," he said. Clara shrugged gently. "I wanted to," she replied. Her voice was still small, but steady. As the sun lowered, Colt sat on the steps, wiping his hands with a cloth. "You must have been through a lot," he said carefully, not pushing her to speak. Clara stared at the sky. "He wasn't kind to me," she said softly. "He made me believe I was worthless." Colt turned to her, his eyes serious. "You're not worthless, Clara. No man who says that deserves you." His words were simple, but they sank deep into her heart. They sat quietly for a while after that, listening to the sound of crickets. It was peaceful, a kind of silence that didn't hurt. When Colt stood up to go inside, he tipped his hat lightly. "You rest easy tonight," he said with a small smile. Clara nodded. "Good night, Colt." That night, as she lay on her bed, she thought about his words again. "You're not worthless." She whispered them to herself, over and over, until she fell asleep. And for the first time in years, she dreamed of open skies, kind eyes, and the feeling of being found, not by accident, but by grace. The next few days passed quietly. The ranch moved with a rhythm Clara had never known, peaceful, steady, and full of purpose. Every morning, Colt woke early to tend to the horses. Martha made breakfast, and Clara helped without being asked. She liked the smell of coffee, the sound of boots on wooden floors, and the feeling that she was useful again. On the fourth morning, Clara walked out to the stables after breakfast. Colt was brushing a chestnut horse named Sparrow. The animal was strong and beautiful, but restless. "He doesn't let anyone near him but me," Colt said, smiling faintly. Clara stepped closer, her eyes gentle. "Can I try?" she asked quietly. Colt looked at her, surprised, then nodded slowly. She moved closer, speaking softly to the horse. Her hand trembled a little, but her voice was calm. "Hey there, boy, it's okay," she whispered. The horse shifted but didn't pull away. She reached out and touched his neck, her touch light but sure. Colt watched silently, amazed. After a few seconds, Sparrow lowered his head. He likes you, Colt said softly, smiling. Most people don't get that close to him. Clara smiled a little too. Maybe he knows how it feels to be scared. After that morning, Clara began spending more time around the horses. She helped Martha with chores, fed the animals, and even learned how to ride under Colt's careful teaching. He was patient, never raised his voice, never rushed her. He would stand beside her, holding the reins gently, saying, "You're doing just fine." As days turned into weeks, laughter began to return to the ranch. Clara smiled more often, and Colt noticed. He found himself looking for her when he returned from town, just to see her standing by the fence, her hair blowing in the wind. Sometimes, he caught himself staring too long. There was something about her strength, quiet, but powerful, that touched him deeply. One afternoon, a small storm rolled in. Clara ran to gather the laundry from the line, and Colt joined her. The wind blew hard, and she laughed, a bright, unguarded laugh that filled the air. He stopped for a moment just to listen. She hadn't laughed like that before. When they finally reached the porch, drenched and breathless, he looked at her and smiled. "You've got a beautiful laugh," he said without thinking. She blushed, looking away. "Thank you," she said softly. That night, as she watched the rain from her window, she realized something. The ranch wasn't just a place of safety anymore. It was beginning to feel like home. And the man who had found her at the riverbank, he wasn't just kind. He was becoming someone her heart trusted, quietly and completely. The morning sun shone brightly across the ranch, and Clara woke to the familiar smell of coffee and hay. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, eager to see the horses. Colt was already in the field, feeding Sparrow and another young horse. He looked up and waved. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice calm and warm. She smiled back, feeling a small flutter in her chest. After breakfast, Colt suggested they take a ride to the far pasture. Clara hesitated at first, nervous about riding too far, but he walked her through every step. "I'll be right beside you," he said. "You won't fall." She nodded, trusting him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone in years. The ride was peaceful, filled with the sound of hooves and the soft wind in their faces. As they rode, Colt spoke quietly. "I wasn't always this calm," he said after a long pause. Clara glanced at him, curious. "Really?" He smiled faintly. "Yes. I lost my wife a few years ago. It was sudden. I wasn't ready, and I blamed myself. After that, I buried myself in this ranch. I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again." Clara's heart ached for him. She hadn't known his story, but hearing it made her feel closer to him somehow. Clara nodded slowly, her voice soft. "I know what it's like to feel abandoned," she said. "My husband, he left me by the river, like I didn't matter at all." Colt reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "You matter, Clara, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve your time." She looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. No one had ever said something like that to her, not with this calm certainty. They rode back in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The quiet was easy between them now, like they were beginning to understand each other without needing words. When they returned to the ranch, Clara felt lighter, as if sharing her story had taken some of the weight off her chest. Colt, too, seemed lighter. The sadness in his eyes was still there, but it wasn't heavy anymore. Later that afternoon, they worked together in the stables. Colt showed her how to groom the horses, how to care for them gently, and how to listen to their small signals. Clara laughed softly when a young colt nipped at her sleeve. Colt smiled and caught her hand to steady her. Their fingers brushed lightly, and a spark ran through her. She looked down, feeling her cheeks warm. That night, Clara sat on her porch, watching the stars above the ranch. She thought about Colt's words, about his past, and about the way he had taken her hand when she needed it most. Slowly, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years began to grow inside her. Hope. Hope that she could trust again, that she could laugh again, and maybe, that she could even love again. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of horses neighing softly. She stretched and stepped onto the porch, taking a deep breath of the fresh ranch air. Colt was already outside, leading Sparrow toward the fence. When he noticed her, he tipped his hat with a small smile. "Morning, Clara," he said. She returned the smile, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Colt suggested they work together on repairing the fence along the western pasture. Clara hesitated at first. She had never done ranch work before, but Colt's calm instructions and gentle encouragement made her feel capable. "Here, hold this," he said, handing her a hammer. "Steady just like that." She followed his guidance, and every time he praised her, a little more confidence returned. While they worked side by side, they talked quietly. Clara told Colt about her dreams before she married Tom. She had always wanted to travel and learn about different cultures. Colt shared his own hopes, like expanding the ranch and creating a safe place for abandoned animals. Their words were simple, but they built a bridge between them. She noticed how patient he was, how he listened without judgment, and how he laughed softly at her small jokes. By late afternoon, they paused and sat on the porch steps, wiping sweat from their faces. "You're strong," Colt said, looking at her with admiration. Clara felt her cheeks heat up. "I've had to be," she admitted quietly. He nodded, but there was more than respect in his eyes. There was something tender, something protective. Her heart beat faster, and she realized she wasn't afraid of him. She felt safe, maybe even cared for. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink, Colt handed her a glass of water. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away. The touch was gentle but electric. "Clara," he started, his voice low, "I don't usually say this, but I'm glad I found you by the river." She looked into his eyes, surprised by the softness in his tone. I'm glad you found me too," she whispered. That night, Clara sat by the window of her small room, thinking about the day. Colt's words, his smile, the way he had guided her hands and let her take her time. It felt like a promise. Not a loud, dramatic one, but a quiet promise that she could trust him, that she could begin to let someone care for her again. Before sleep, she held the small locket she always wore, remembering the riverbank. From the edge of fear and loneliness, she had stepped into a place of kindness and calm. And though she didn't yet know what the future held, a small, bright hope glimmered in her heart. Hope that maybe, just maybe, love could be gentle and true. The next morning, Clara woke early and stepped outside to see the ranch bathed in soft golden light. Colt was already in the field, teaching a young boy from the nearby town how to ride a horse safely. When he noticed Clara, he waved with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Morning, Clara," he called. She smiled back, feeling warmth and a little excitement at seeing him so naturally in his element. Colt suggested they ride to the creek to check the water level after the recent rain. Clara felt nervous at first, but he stayed beside her the entire way, holding the reins lightly. "You're doing great," he encouraged. She laughed softly when her horse stumbled slightly, and he reached over to steady her. Their hands touched again, brief but electric, and Clara felt a shiver of something new, something tender stirring in her chest. At the creek, they paused to rest. Clara dipped her hands in the cool water, watching the ripples spread. Colt knelt beside her and handed her a clean cloth. "You've got a gentle way with the animals," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "You really think so?" He nodded. "Yes. Most people try to force them, but you listen first." Clara's chest tightened. No one had ever seen that in her before, not even Tom. They spent the afternoon checking fences, feeding horses, and laughing quietly at small mistakes. Colt never raised his voice, never rushed her. He was patient and attentive, and Clara noticed every small act of kindness. When he handed her a water bottle, their fingers brushed. She felt warmth spread from her hand to her heart. "You're becoming braver every day," he said softly, meeting her eyes. She smiled shyly. As evening fell, they walked along the edge of the ranch, horses following quietly. Clara felt her shoulders relax, her laughter coming more easily than it had in years. Colt didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with calm sincerity. "I like spending time with you," he said simply. She stopped and looked at him. "I like being here," she whispered. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to fade. Just the two of them, quiet, safe, and connected. Later that night, Clara sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle over the ranch. She thought about Colt's words, the way he had touched her hand, the way he looked at her with patience and care. Slowly, she realized she trusted him completely. It wasn't just the safety of the ranch or the kindness he showed. It was something deeper. She felt a small, warm flutter in her chest, the first spark of hope for love she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Before going to bed, she whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I can let someone love me again." And for the first time, she didn't feel fear or shame. She felt ready to open her heart, just a little, to a man who had found her at her lowest, who had offered her safety, kindness, and a gentle hand to hold. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of fresh coffee and pancakes. Martha had prepared breakfast, and Colt was already sitting at the table, reading through some ranch papers. When he saw her, his face lit up with a soft smile. "Morning, Clara," he said. She returned the smile, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. It was strange to feel excitement just to see someone, but she liked it. After breakfast, Colt suggested they go check the horses in the northern pasture. Clara followed quietly, enjoying the sound of the wind through the fields and the soft rhythm of the horses' hooves. Colt stayed close, guiding her gently and making sure she was steady. When her horse stumbled slightly, his hand brushed hers again. She felt a spark she couldn't ignore, but this time, she didn't pull away. As they reached the northern pasture, Colt leaned against the fence and watched her. "You've really changed since the riverbank," he said softly. "You look lighter." Clara looked down, her cheeks warming. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "I don't feel trapped or afraid anymore." Colt's eyes softened. "I'm glad," he said quietly. "You deserve to feel free." They spent the afternoon feeding the horses and fixing fences, talking quietly about small dreams and wishes. Clara laughed when a young colt tried to nibble at her sleeve. Colt chuckled softly and steadied her hand. "You're patient with them," he said. "Most people would get frustrated." Clara shook her head. "I don't like hurting anything or anyone," she said. Colt smiled, his gaze lingering on her in a way that made her heart beat faster. As the sun began to set, they walked along a small trail toward the creek. The sky was painted with pink and orange, and the air was soft. Colt stopped and looked at her. "Clara, I know you've been hurt before," he said gently, "but I want you to know, I'll never leave you like he did." She looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity in every word. Her chest tightened. I believe you," she whispered. That evening, Clara sat on the porch, thinking about Colt and the way he had held her hand, guided her, and treated her with quiet respect. She realized she hadn't felt safe, loved, or seen like that in years. And now, just the thought of him brought warmth and hope to her heart. Slowly, she began to imagine a future where she could trust again, laugh again, and maybe even fall in love. Before she went to bed, she held her locket and whispered softly to herself, Maybe this is the beginning of something real." She smiled through her tears, knowing that the cruel days of her past were behind her, and that a gentle, kind man was helping her step into a new life, one full of trust, safety, and love. The next morning, Clara woke to the soft golden light of the ranch. The birds were singing, and the air smelled fresh and warm. She stretched and smiled, thinking about the days that had passed, about Colt, the horses, and the peace she finally felt. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid or alone. Colt was already in the barn, checking on the horses. When he saw her, he smiled and waved. "Morning, Clara," he called. She waved back, her heart lifting. Today felt different. Today felt full of hope. He walked over and handed her a fresh bottle of water. "Ready to start the day?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes," she said, smiling brightly. They spent the morning riding through the fields, laughing when the horses got playful and teasing each other gently. Colt showed Clara how to handle the young foals, and she followed his instructions carefully. He watched her with pride, noticing how strong and brave she had become. Every glance, every shared smile made their bond feel deeper, more real. By afternoon, they returned to the ranch house. Colt suggested they rest on the porch. The sky was painted in soft pinks and oranges, and the warm breeze carried the scent of grass and flowers. He reached out and gently took her hand. "Clara, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting for someone like you for years," he said softly. Her heart raced. "Colt, I feel the same way," she whispered. That evening, as the stars appeared in the clear sky, Colt led Clara to a quiet spot near the riverbank, the place where he had first found her. He knelt down on one knee, holding her hands in his. "Clara James, will you be mine? Not because of the past, not because of anyone else, but because of us." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded, her voice trembling but full of joy. "Yes, yes, I will." They embraced under the soft starlight, feeling the cool breeze and the gentle sound of the river. For the first time, Clara felt completely safe, completely loved, and completely free. The past, the cruel husband, the fear, the loneliness, was behind her. Ahead of her was Colt, the ranch, the horses, and a life full of warmth, trust, and laughter. Clara had been left alone at the riverbank, but she had been found by someone who cared deeply, someone who saw her worth, and someone who would never let her fall again. Together, they walked back to the ranch, hands intertwined, hearts full, ready to start their new life, a life of love, peace, and endless hope. The morning sun rose over the ranch. Clara woke to the sound of Colt moving around the kitchen. She felt safe and calm. She got out of bed and went to see him. "Morning," she said quietly. Colt handed her a cup of coffee. "Morning," he said. He smiled softly. Clara held the cup in her hands and felt warm inside. It was simple, but it made her happy. They didn't need to say more. After breakfast, they went outside to work. Clara carried hay bales, while Colt fixed a broken fence. Sometimes the horses got in the way, and they laughed quietly. Clara realized she was enjoying being here and doing things with Colt. She felt useful, and it made her feel good. By afternoon, they were both tired. They sat under a big tree to rest. Colt put his arm around Clara gently. She leaned against him. "I like this place," she said softly. Colt nodded. "I'm glad you're here," he said. Later, Colt showed Clara how to ride one of the younger horses. He stood close to guide her. "Hold the reins steady," he said. Clara followed his instructions. Every time their hands touched, she felt safe. When the work was done, they returned to the ranch house. Martha had made dinner, and they ate quietly. Clara noticed that every small act of care, the food, the clean clothes, the soft words, made her trust Colt more and more. That night, Clara lay in her room thinking about the day. She realized she wasn't scared anymore. She felt happy and safe. She thought about Colt and smiled. For the first time, she looked forward to tomorrow. It was late afternoon, and Clara was feeding the horses when Colt noticed something unusual near the fence line. He frowned. "Clara, stay close," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised, and nodded. A few men appeared at the edge of the property. They were strangers, and they were moving quickly toward the barn. Colt moved in front of Clara, his body steady. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Colt shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to be careful." Colt called out loudly, "Hey, you can't be here." The men ignored him and kept walking. Clara's heart raced. She felt scared but stayed close to Colt. He held her hand tightly. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. Colt grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the barn. Clara followed behind, clutching the small rope he had given her for emergencies. When they reached the barn, Colt shone the light toward the men. "Leave now or I call the police," he shouted. One of the men laughed and stepped forward, but Colt stayed calm and strong. The men hesitated when they saw Colt wasn't afraid. Clara realized that his calmness gave her courage too. "We have to stay together," Colt said, keeping his eyes on the intruders. Clara nodded, holding his hand tightly. After a few tense minutes, the men finally turned and ran back toward the road. Colt watched until they disappeared. Then he turned to Clara. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, her hand still shaking a little. "Yes, thanks to you," she whispered. That night, after the intruders left, Clara sat with Colt on the porch. She felt safe again, even though she had been scared. "I knew you'd protect me," she said softly. Colt smiled and held her hand. Always. You're my priority, Clara. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling closer to him than ever before. The morning after the intruders, Clara woke feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. She remembered last night, how scared she had been, and how Colt had stayed strong beside her. She smiled softly, realizing she trusted him completely now. Colt was already outside, checking the fences that the intruders had tried to damage. When he saw Clara, he waved. "Morning," he said. She walked over and handed him a cup of coffee. "For you," she said. He accepted it with a smile. "Thanks. You're becoming a good helper," he said gently. They spent the morning repairing the fence together. Clara lifted hay bales, hammered posts, and followed Colt's instructions carefully. Every time their hands brushed, she felt warmth. Colt noticed too, and he would glance at her quietly, smiling when she looked away. By afternoon, they took a break near the creek. Colt pulled out a blanket and spread it on the grass. "Sit with me," he said. Clara hesitated, then sat beside him. They didn't talk at first, just watched the water flow. The quiet felt peaceful after yesterday's chaos. Colt reached over and took her hand. "I know it's been hard for you," he said softly, "but you're strong, and I'm proud of you." Clara looked at him, feeling a lump in her throat. I feel safe with you," she whispered. Colt squeezed her hand gently. "Good. That's exactly how it should feel." As the sun began to set, Clara rested her head against Colt's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. She felt like she belonged with him. That night, Clara lay in her room thinking about Colt. She smiled to herself, feeling hope and happiness. The fear of the intruders was gone. The cruel days of her past were gone too. Now she had Colt, the ranch, and a life filled with safety, trust, and love.